morning, everyone. I'm Linsey Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We begin an ABC News Live special, Your Voice, Your Vote 2026, the midterms. Voters took to the polls in 5 states today: Virginia, Michigan, Missouri, Kansas, and Washington. Results are starting to steadily come in. We are just 3 months out from the midterm elections. We have our ABC News political powerhouse team to break it all down. Jonathan Karl, Rick Klein, Avery Harper, and Jay O'Brien on the ground there in Michigan. Want to kick it off to you because since we last talked, Rick, a lot has changed. Only 35% of the vote in, but we're starting to really see it tighten up, the race between El Sayed and Stevens.
A significant tightening, and a lot of it has to do with vote that we've seen coming out of Wayne County. That is Detroit and Dearborn. So it's potentially a base for both candidates. The black vote is huge in Detroit, the Muslim vote huge in Dearborn. A lot of this is the early vote. And Stevens so far is racking up an enormous lead. Now, it's very unlikely, to my mind, that she's able to keep up that kind of a margin, like a 2-to-1 margin in Wayne County. If she does, she's going to win this race. But if she doesn't, we're talking about a little bit more of a dogfight. We've seen as the night has gone on, I think one of the big stories is that Stevens held her ground in her home base, Oakland County. That's a lot of the wealthier suburbs like Flint, like Pontiac, like Royal Oak. But we saw El Sayed do way better than that in his home county, the liberal base around Ann Arbor and the University of Michigan. I do want to take a look quickly at the early vote that we've seen so far to show a little bit of the story right here. Even though El Sayed is winning by 15,000 votes, that's the early vote. That's a 30,000 vote edge for Stevens. So that means that's like traditional organizing that brings people out in the ways that you traditionally win a campaign. Now, does it always work? You don't know that. And that's where some of the surprises are coming in tonight. But as the numbers have come in, for the most part, we're seeing El Sayed hit his numbers in the big places. Grand Rapids, Kent County, another one where he's netting about 15,000 votes. That should be better for Haley Stevens. But this is still a very close race, and it is going to come down, as always, to Wayne County, to Detroit, with only less than a quarter of the vote in. It's too early to tell who's going to come out on top.
But record turnout so far? It's
looking like we're on track, as Avery has been reporting as well. We saw early vote reach records, and it does look like we're on track to set records for a primary in a non-presidential year when you just have statewide races on the ballot.
Any idea who the early vote is breaking for?
It does look like it's mostly Stevens, and that is interesting, and certainly that's the case in Wayne County. And you can look at it right in Wayne County and see how big it is. But beyond Wayne County, as the whole state has gone, we're seeing the early vote break in other ways that's not coming up on the screen right now. But trust me on this.
But we believe you, Rick.
We'll see it come up, but in any event, it does look like the early vote is up pretty significantly for Stevens. That cuts a little both ways, too. Some of the early vote actually went to Mallory McMorrow, who was on the ballot technically, and if people voted a few weeks ago, she was still running for the seat. She dropped out. She's getting a tiny bit of the vote. That might actually be determinative. But as we've seen these numbers pour in, again, looking at Wayne County, with that kind of edge is built on the back of early vote.
And John, for those who are just joining us and wondering why so much emphasis on Michigan, obviously we have said that this is must win for Democrats if they want to get control of the Senate during the midterms. But give us a sense of why this is such a bellwether, whether you call it, the battle for the soul of the Democratic Party or the civil war within the Democratic Party, this us versus them that you're seeing emerge within the Democratic Party between the moderates and progressives.
Yeah, I mean, we've been seeing a real battle for the soul of the Democratic Party that's been playing out actually for several election cycles, but especially this year, between the more traditional Democrats, and these are not, I wouldn't call them moderate Democrats. These include traditional liberal Democrats and moderate Democrats, the party leaders against this progressive, sometimes socialist wing of the party that appears to be ascendant. And we've talked, Linsey, about how we've seen some really significant, symbolically important victories for Democratic socialists in this country. Mayor Mamdani, perhaps the most prominent in New York. But we're going to have a Democratic Socialist mayor in Washington, D.C. We have a Democratic Socialist mayor in Seattle. We've got one that could become mayor in Los Angeles. We had the primary battles in New York City and in Denver, where you saw Democratic Socialist candidates knock off Democratic incumbent members of Congress, powerful members of Congress, largely with the endorsements of Bernie Sanders. I mean, Bernie Sanders has really been the driving force of all this. Well, now this is a test not in a liberal city or in a particularly liberal part of a liberal city, but in the ultimate swing state of Michigan. And look at the battle lines, how they are here. On one hand, Haley Stevens is endorsed by Gretchen Whitmer, two-term governor of the state, Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader, by the senator that she's running to replace. And then on the other side, Abdul Al-Sayed is endorsed not just by Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, AOC, Democratic Socialist America. Now, he's not a socialist. That's not the title he uses for himself. But boy, do the Democratic Socialists like him. This is the latest and by far the biggest battleground for that war for the soul of the Democratic Party.
I want to bring in Jay O'Brien, who's in Michigan at the headquarters for Al-Sayed. People have called him the Mamdani of Michigan. You've been speaking to voters there. What are they saying?
Linsey, I can tell you in this room, they have felt this race tighten. There was a palpable energy earlier on in the evening when, as Rick said, some of that early vote was coming in favoring Abdul Al-Sayed. I've talked with those in the campaign. They tell us they still feel confident. They still like the numbers they have seen. But if you talk to voters in this room and Al-Sayed supporters in this room, as I've been doing for the last few minutes, they have seen that this race has narrowed, and they're taking very little for granted at this hour. They do feel that this is in large part an exercise, as you and I were talking about earlier, of making their voices heard, of compelling the establishment of the Democratic Party to listen to the progressive wing of the party, which feels that Democratic leaders have long ignored them, because this is a battle, as you have said time and time again tonight, for the very soul of the Democratic Party. We cannot overstate Haley Stevens was the establishment pick of Democrats. She was established by top Democratic leaders. She tied herself closely to the governor of Michigan, to former President Obama, to the current senator who's sitting in the seat that she wants to fill, Gary Peters, who's retiring. And on the flip side, you had Abdul Al-Sayed, who was Democratic Socialist, DSA adjacent, who had the backing of Bernie Sanders and AOC, and really tried to pick up that progressive mantle here in Michigan. And so as we see this race tighten, it's less now, as some folks in this room have said, of this groundswell of an indictment that progressives truly have the energy and have the grassroots of the party, but we've got to wait to see how the vote total comes out tonight to truly see what kind of indication this is for the future of the Democratic Party come November and beyond, Linsey.
It is tight at this hour. Jay O'Brien, thank you. Avery, you were on the ground there in Michigan in recent days. What were you hearing from residents about the issues that are driving their vote?
You know, it was a few things. I think that the message of getting corporate money out of politics is something that resonated with voters. Also, opting not to send money for foreign conflicts, particularly in Israel. That's something that I heard a lot from voters around the Detroit area. And that is in line with Abdul Al-Sayed's message. He has talked a lot about the spending, the massive spending by outside groups in this race to boost his opponent, Haley Stevens. And he has made that really central to his message. And that's been a flashpoint in this race. But also, it's been about issues of affordability. I heard a lot about the cost of health care, a lot about high utility rates in the state of Michigan. And that's something that both Al-Sayed and Haley Stevens have talked about on the campaign trail. I think for Haley Stevens, it's about enthusiasm. She says that she has the enthusiasm on her side, but we've definitely seen a lot more tangible enthusiasm for Abdul Al-Sayed. She speaks to her experience as a legislator, as somebody who wants to put her head down and get the job done for Michiganders in Washington. But I heard a lot from voters who want a fighter in Washington, and that's the vibes of the Al-Sayed campaign.
All right, thank you. I want to bring in ABC News political contributor and founder of More Perfect Union, Faz Shakir. And Faz, you were a longtime advisor for Bernie Sanders, who endorsed Abdul Al-Sayed early in his campaign. Meanwhile, Stevens has the backing of the Democratic establishment in Washington. What do you make of the vote so far as we're seeing it come in?
Well, because of the nature of how votes come in, there's kind of this wave up and down that we're going to see for a bit. My suspicion and belief based off of the numbers is that it'll go in Abdul's favor here decisively. That said, I'm looking very closely at Wayne County. and that's where Donovan McKinney is facing Sri Tenadar. At the moment, with 27% or so in, McKinney is a little bit behind. I'm hoping that he can pull this out. This is a candidate that Bernie Sanders has endorsed. I think he's be a great addition to the House. And if he can pull it out, it means good things for Abdul as well in that same county, a county that he's struggling in a little bit at the moment. That black vote, Abdul endorsed McKinney, by the way, and McKinney endorsed Abdul, so these are allies. And so I suspect that some of McKinney's ability to win this district, knock on wood, will also help Abdul.
I want to go back to the Senate race here with El Sayed. He was vastly outspent with outside money heavily favoring Stevens. But as of right now, he's ahead in the vote count. What impact did the flood of outside money have on this race?
Well, for a lot of voters who are, let's say, low information voters, you're not following politics every day. You're a working class person. There's other things going on in your life. And you may not be paying all that much attention. You get flooded with tons and tons of TV ads. And if you looked at the specific TV ads that AIPAC was spending upwards of $50 to $60 million to run, those ads were saying Abdul Sayed said a mean thing about Michelle Obama. Haley Stevens was endorsed by or Barack Obama. Not quite true, but they at least led you to believe that that was the case. So for a lot of low information voters, you flood the airways with this. And I bet near every Michigander has seen some of those ads and has seen the words Obama, Michelle, or Barack Obama suggesting that they are for Haley Stevens. And so what that ends up doing over, a course of election cycle, you can see the difference. It helps move some people who aren't following these races as closely as you and I are, Linsey, and it moves them towards to Haley. And that's what happens when you have that much amount of money trying to buy an election.
How much would you say that the war in Iran has played a role in this race?
But huge. This is why AIPAC is involved in this race. Haley Stevens has indicated very publicly and aggressively that she is a huge supporter of Israel and will support every dollar that we need to send to Netanyahu. Abdul, on the other hand, is a deep conviction over many, many years saying he would not spend another nickel to support Netanyahu. And of course, AIPAC made their decision to say, well, then we're going to spend $50 million plus to go in to try to defeat this candidate. And they ran, unlike in other primary campaigns, they said in this one, we're going to advertise very aggressively that the United Democracy Project, AIPAC's campaign spending arm, is the sponsor of these ads. So they made an aggressive play to say, we are going to try to influence this and essentially buy a vote in support of their pro-Israel, pro-Netanyahu position. I tend to believe, if you spend $54 million against somebody else who spends $4 million, that if the voters then go with the person who spent $4 million, you might find that you are on the wrong side of the American public. And I tend to think that's what we're going to find out here as Michiganders are decisively in Abdul's favor on the issue of Iran war and ending it and stopping military funding for Netanyahu.
We will hear how they rule ultimately very soon. Faz, thank you so much for your time tonight. Really appreciate it. And just want to bring you in, John, really quickly before we take a look at where the vote is coming in tonight, because we were talking earlier and Faz just mentioned the money and this AIPAC money and how this has really played a key role in this race in particular.
Well, if you look at overall super PAC money on this race, it's been extraordinary. $32 million just on television ads in the final 5 weeks of the campaign. That's the total spending, okay? 30 million of that was spent by super PACs supporting Haley Stevens, just 2 million supporting El Sayed. And the vast majority of the money for Stevens came from AIPAC. And what that did, AIPAC, of course, the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee, that enabled El Sayed to point out two of his top issues, which is getting big money out of politics, saying she's bought and paid for. And not only is she bought and paid for, but she's bought and paid for by the group that is supporting the war in Iran. Now, that's not necessarily the fair argument. AIPAC would say we're not supporting the war in Iran.
But that's how he's
but that's how it's something that some of his supporters believe actually, nobody likes to get outspent that much, and all those ads attacking you can have a real impact, but it transformed the race in the eyes of many the El Sayed supporters.
All right, let's take a closer look at the results across the states that are voting tonight. Once again, we're taking a look at that race between El Sayed and Stevens. He's got about 3% of the margin in favor of him at this moment. On the flip side, Mike Rogers, projected winner. He was running uncontested there tonight for the Republican side of the Michigan Senate race. The Congressional District 7, which is something that we've been watching very closely tonight because, again, it kind of frames up that battle between William Lawrence, who is the progressive candidate who's been endorsed by Bernie Sanders, running against these establishment Democrats, and he's handily beating them at this hour with nearly 50% of the vote in. Congressional District 13, again, that's where we're only 27% of the vote, but McKinney down by 8%, roughly 8% of the vote there. And so we are keeping a close eye on that race. Jocelyn Benson, projected winner on the Democratic side for the gubernatorial race there in Michigan. And on the Republican side, we have yet to project there, only 30% of the vote in, but James handily beating Johnson at this time. Wesley Bell, this was a bit of a surprise. He's a projected winner in Congressional District 1 in Missouri, where he was going up against Cori Bush. Of course, he was able to oust her the last time around, but many thought that she might have a little bit more energy tonight. Emmanuel Cleaver, who we spoke to earlier, going to turn 82 years old in October, but he said he doesn't look like he's 80, he doesn't act like he's 80. ABC News is projecting him as the winner for Congressional District number 5. And on the Republican side, you see Rick Bratton, the projected winner on the Republican side in that district. And I want to go back to you, Rick. We were talking earlier. Actually, I'm sorry, we're going to bring in our former advisor to President Trump, Danielle Alvarez. Danielle, thank you so much for staying with us tonight. And we're seeing the results from the Michigan Senate primary continue to come in. What do you imagine that Mike Rogers' campaign is thinking watching these numbers?
Well, if I'm Mike Rogers' campaign, I am certainly hoping that the progressive Democrat wins. I think, again, it's probably a more favorable matchup when you look at the makeup of the electorate in a Democrat primary versus the makeup of the electorate in a general. Those two just don't coincide. You've got to be able to win moderate voters, independent voters, and that just becomes very difficult, again, for these very progressive candidates that are winning in this civil war happening within the party. That is, you're seeing it play out in New York. You're seeing a lot of those Chuck Schumer and establishment candidates lose. And it's very upsetting, of course, for those establishment Democrats, but it is a great opportunity for Republicans, especially in a state like Michigan, where Democrats have to hold that Senate seat if they want to capture the majority.
President Trump has said that Rogers is one of the best candidates we have anywhere. What would you say to critics who claim that he's loyal to Trump and national GOP politics rather than the interests of Michigan voters?
Well, I think that Rogers is an incredible candidate, of course. He served in the United States Army and served bravely in our military. He has served in Congress for many terms, of course, recently voted for the working class tax cuts for American families that is so hugely popular. He has a great record. He's an outstanding candidate. He's raising money. He's working hard. And I think he has the right apparatus surrounding him to help get him over the finish line. Now, this Michigan race will probably be the most expensive race of this midterm cycle. Cook Political has it as a toss-up, and so that really gives Republicans the opportunity, of course, because he is a great candidate.
And what else are you watching nationally as we head toward the general election and the balance of power in Congress?
You know, I'm really paying attention. First of all, the idea of swing elections is no longer realistic mathematically. The way that redistricting has occurred, there is a very narrow number of seats up at play in the House. Really, again, if you're looking at those Cook Political scores, it's about a dozen or 2 dozen. And so these races will be won on the margins. And so you'll have operatives and experts in each party really narrowing things down. The thing that I'm looking at for Republicans Republicans, of course, is the cash on hand that they have. The president very famously talking about his billion-dollar war chest. The Republican National Committee recently announcing that they have $130 million cash on hand. Of course, that's very important with the coordinating limits that have come down. It allows the parties to coordinate with the campaigns in ways that has not been allowed in previous cycles. You know, there is a lot at play and a lot of new things that will determine the outcome. So I think that this is going to be a cycle unlike ones that we have seen in the past. It's going to be a very expensive cycle. It's going to be one on the margins. There's a very narrow path to victory in the House, of course, in the Senate as well. And so I'm really looking to see at what those committees, those campaigns, and certainly the president's spending looks like heading into the general.
All right, Danielle Alvarez, thank you. And I believe that ABC News does have a new projection to make. There you go, John James, the projected winner on the Republican side for the gubernatorial race there in Michigan, with only 31% of the vote in, but already we're able to project that he is the winner. We'll be going back to the big boards with Rick Klein after the break. But coming up, we'll keep following these primary results as they come in. Welcome back, everyone. A family scandal erupted in full public view today. Embattled Congressman Max Miller of Ohio is accused of domestic abuse by his ex-wife. He denies it, but his former father-in-law, Ohio Senator Bernie Moreno, is now speaking out, calling Miller a madman. Here's our senior political correspondent, Rachel Scott.
Tonight, a family scandal erupting into full view on Capitol Hill. Republican Senator Bernie Moreno of Ohio calling his former son-in-law, Ohio Congressman Max Miller, who is running for re-election, a madman, saying the congressman, who is married to the senator's daughter, Emily, is putting the family through hell.
This is truly the seventh level of hell. This has been a horrific experience for my entire family.
The senator's daughter, Emily, claims Congressman Miller, her ex-husband, abused her. In a February police report obtained by ABC News, she claims he threw her against the wall, once held a gun to her head, and another time threw hot water on her. Miller says she's lying. As proof, he said his ex-wife offered to cook him dinner several days after one of the alleged incidents.
6 days later, she offered to cook empanadas for me for dinner. So ask yourself, if I had assaulted her, would she have offered to cook me dinner 6 days later?
Miller's former father-in-law, Senator Moreno, furious.
My daughter lives in constant fear of this man. Deeply in her heart, she fears what this guy is capable of.
Caught in the middle, the couple's 2-year-old daughter. Senator Moreno said he had to pick the child up from Miller over the weekend.
So I meet him at the Bay Village police station, because that's the place that we have to go to meet, because I don't know what this guy's capable of. She comes over, gets in our car, we drive away, and if anybody's a parent, she has a little blue bunny that she sleeps with. Max would not hand over the little blue bunny. Literally held it hostage for 48 hours. This girl is crying at night because she can't sleep without her little blue bunny. And his answer is, I'm just not gonna give it to you. So finally yesterday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, yesterday, he lets the little blue bunny go. This is the level of total and complete depravity.
Miller is also accused of physically abusing his daughter.
I have never abused our daughter.
Miller says his daughter was hurt by employees at her daycare. The local Department of Children and Family Services did not find evidence to substantiate allegations of child abuse against him. Senator Moreno says Congressman Miller is not fit for office. But tonight, Miller's saying he's not going anywhere.
So for no second am I going to sit here and continue to be debased by false and baseless allegations and be pushed out of a seat I have worked so hard to represent and done a terrific job for our community.
Rachel Scott joins us now from the Capitol. And Rachel, just to explain the timeline here, when does Miller need to change his mind, drop out, or resign?
Yeah, well, Linsey, he would certainly be running out of time if he decides to change his mind. He would only have until tomorrow, Tuesday night, to drop out of this race in time for Republicans to try to hold a special election in order to replace him so that his name does not appear on the ballot. But so far, he is defiant that he's staying in this race. And while President Trump has publicly called Miller a good person, sources tell me that behind the scenes, the president did talk to Miller by phone, and he did express concerns about whether or not he can win re-election. Meanwhile, House Republican leadership, they have remained silent on all of this, Linsey.
Rachel Scott for us from Capitol Hill. Thanks so much, Rachel. Signs of progress tonight in negotiations between the U.S. and Iran, 24 hours after President Trump said he was giving Tehran a last chance. An Iranian spokesperson is now saying talks to reopen the Strait of Hormuz have been positive. That news is already affecting oil and gas prices. Here's ABC's Matt Rivers.
Tonight, stocks surging to record highs on Wall Street and oil prices plunging, based on hope that 6 months into the war with Iran, some sort of agreement is close to reopen the critical Strait of Hormuz. Details of any possible deal remain unclear, but the Dow soaring 900 points, closing above 54,000 for the first time ever. The price of U.S. oil dropping below $80 after the Trump administration signaled a deal may be close.
There's been progress made in those talks, but not finality yet. We're hoping that will happen very shortly.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent today offering this timeline.
We may have a deal today or tomorrow to open the strait.
Iran today saying they are only negotiating with Oman about control over the Strait of Hormuz, claiming talks were positive. Iran has repeatedly said it will keep control over the strait, which was open free to international traffic before the war, and they have said they might charge fees. President Trump warned this is Iran's last chance to make a deal, insisting the strait will not be tolled.
We're not talking about charging at all. There won't be charging.
Our thanks to Matt Rivers. And coming up, voters headed to the polls in 5 states today. Our politics team will keep following these primary results as they come in. Good evening, everyone. I'm Linsey Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We begin with an ABC News Live special, Your Voice, Your Vote. 2026, the midterms. Voters took to the polls in 5 states today: Virginia, Michigan, Missouri, Kansas, and Washington. Results are coming in. Let's take a look so far. 41% of the vote in that make or break, especially for the Democrats, if there is any hope of getting control of the Senate come November. Look, you have El Sayed just leading by, about 3%? Over Haley Stevens, still relatively neck and neck there. And take a look at the next board. Projected winner there, Mike Rogers. Of course, he was running uncontested on the Republican side for the Senate race in Michigan. William Lawrence, projected winner there in Congressional District number 7 in Michigan. William Lawrence, of course, considered to be the more progressive candidate in that race against 2 establishment Democrats. And Tom Barrett, projected winner on the Republican side for the Congressional District 7 in Michigan. We're not looking at it. Okay, I was just making sure we didn't have any more boards there. And we are just 3 months out from the midterm elections. We have our ABC News political powerhouse team here tonight, still breaking it all down with us. Rick Klein and Avery Harper still joining us. Jay O'Brien on the ground there in Michigan. All right, so let's get back to where we started. 42% of the vote in Michigan. It seems like we keep, having this contractions throughout the night.
Yeah, just as different parts of the state report the vote. A 20,000 vote edge right now for Abdul Al-Sayed. A lot of that is powered by his home base of support, Washtenaw County. That's Ann Arbor. That's the University of Michigan. That's where Al-Sayed lives. In fact, 20,000 votes is the edge in that county. So you can just account for his statewide margin just based on that one county. You contrast that a little bit with Oakland County, which is where Haley Stevens' base of support is. She's netting only about 6,200 votes out of that. And with most of that vote in, it's unlikely she gets much more. And we've seen Al-Sayed do very well out in Grand Rapids and Kent County as well. This is going to be the big one to watch as the night goes on. So far, Stevens with a big lead in Wayne County. That's Detroit and Dearborn, Michigan. Now, we should note that is mostly early vote. She has an edge in early vote across the state. So as the election day vote gets in, that edge in the county may be different, but that's where you've got the votes that are still outstanding. And there are plenty out there to make this continue to tighten as we see these numbers continue to roll in again, like that range of 15 to 20,000, 25,000 edge. It really isn't that much when you get into it.
And of course, the major theme throughout the night that we came into the night really knowing would be the case of this battle for the soul of the Democratic Party, and that's bearing out not only in that race but also something that we've been watching in Congressional District 7.
Yeah, you mentioned Will Lawrence. Now this is a district that has swung back and forth the last couple of election cycles. It's now represented by a Republican, Tom Barrett. I think he won by about 1 percentage point last time around. Big prime pickup opportunity for Democrats, and they had in Bridget Brink and Matt Masdam, two just dynamic and tremendously resumed candidates. Brink was the ambassador to Ukraine. Masdam was a Navy SEAL under the Obama administration. If you add their numbers together, that's 56% of the vote. If you assume that they're taking from the same pool of vote, they win. But they ended up splitting a lot of the establishment vote. That has been the case in a whole lot of places around the country. We're adding Will Lawrence to this list of self-avowed Democratic socialists who are on the ballot this year. Rashida Tlaib also winning her primary today. We've been talking about Donovan McKinney. He's down right now in that race, still has a chance. But this is part of the face of the Democratic Party. And Republicans are going to make a lot out of the fact that in this battleground state and a battleground district, Will Lawrence, again, Democratic socialist, is going to be the Democratic candidate.
And Will got into, what would we call it, hot water, maybe a little bit? Is that fair to say about the black establishment?
Yes, he's made some controversial comments. He once said that black political leaders in Washington were the pillar of capitalist and imperialist American establishment, and that they defanged the white left. And so he said those comments were taken out of context. But I do wonder if Abdul al-Sayed, who has supported Will Lawrence, has appeared with Will Lawrence, if his support will hurt Abdul al-Sayed with black voters, in tandem with the perception that Abdul al-Sayed did not fully support Kamala Harris in 2024. You have to remember Michigan is the home of that uncommitted movement that arguably hurt Kamala Harris in the presidential election there. When I talked to Abdul al-Sayed a few weeks ago in Michigan, he said that he did support her. He had deep disagreements with her and her policy and her stance on the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza and support to Israel, but that he supported her. But I do wonder if that perception that still lingers and that Haley Stevens, quite frankly, is trying to exploit, if that hurts him with black voters that he desperately needs in order to win state.
And speaking of the black vote, and I'm going to come back to you in one moment, Avery, but Rick, just walk us through what's happening here in Congressional District 13.
Yeah, this is a district. It is a heavily Democratic district. It is Detroit. It is predominantly African American, but it's been represented by an Indian American for the last couple of terms in Sri Thanadar. He's been self-funding his campaign. But we've seen Donovan McKinney get a lot of national attention from Bernie Sanders, an SAIU organizer, as I mentioned, also a member of the Democratic Socialists. He's running a pretty spirited challenge. He's down about 2,000 votes with only about a quarter of the vote in. We're seeing a lot of votes still outstanding in the state. And in fact, as it's come in, things have gotten a little better for Abdul Sayed statewide. But this is a key House race, again, for that progressive left as they look to establish a new inroad, and because they're looking at, frankly, so many fewer black Democrats next cycle because of redistricting, primarily looking to reclaim seats like this with its history of black representation, a big priority. And
so only, of course, about a third of the vote in at this hour. But are you surprised, given that McKinney is trailing?
You know, not really. Black voters make up about half of that district. It's anchored in Detroit's east side, a predominantly black community in the city of Detroit. And you have to remember that black voters within the Democratic Party often serve as a sort of moderating voice and voice within the Democratic Party. And so they value things like experience and longstanding connections. I mean, Donovan McKinney is a son of this this neighborhood. He is a native of this area of Detroit. But I wonder if they look to the voters in that district are looking to Kandahar as somebody with experience over sort of the glitz and glam of this progressive platform that Donovan McKinney has been championing alongside Abdul El-Sayed.
All right, Avery, thank you. I want to bring in ABC's Jay O'Brien. He's at El-Sayed headquarters there in Detroit, Michigan. Has the energy changed? Would you say that you've seen a shift? Because as these votes come in waves, initially there was a lot of excitement when initially El-Sayed seemed to have a quite a bit of the lead, but now we've seen this tightening.
Yeah, and then Haley closed the gap. There was that big dump of Haley vote, and the mood here, while it is a little jubilant, there's still some cheering behind me. It did noticeably shift from being optimistic, feeling that they were on somewhat of a path here to victory, an easy path to victory, to now seeing that this race is, at least at the meantime, going to be narrow. And there's only, 20,000 votes, 30,000 votes between the two candidates at this hour. We've been talking to voters over the course of the day, Linsey, at various polling places in and around the Detroit area. And one of the things that struck us in our conversations was particularly the age gap here. The younger voters we met, those younger progressive voters, of course, were more apt to back Abdul El-Sayed. And a number of them said to me that they were doing so because they feel the American dream, as one put it, has really slipped out of their grasp. And they were attracted to what El-Sayed said time and time again on affordability and the cost of living. Although there was one voter who said to me her top issue was electability, because that is the key argument that Haley Stevens has made here to voters, that she can win in a statewide election in November in a way that she says Abdul El-Sayed cannot. And as John has pointed out time and time again here, that is going to be a key test, because the DSA-backed candidates and these DSA-adjacent candidates, and we'd put probably Abdul El-Sayed in that adjacent column, they have won over the last few weeks and months in deep blue congressional districts, places that have heavy progressive populations. Democratic Party leaders have repeatedly wanted to point that out, but we haven't seen something like this on a statewide scale. And so the question really will be tonight, in that vote differential, how big of a win does Abdul El-Sayed have if he has one, or does Haley Stevens edge him out?
All right, Jay O'Brien there at El-Sayed headquarters. Thanks so much, Jay. I want to bring back in ABC News political contributor and founder of More Perfect Union, Faz Shakir. Faz, thank you once again for joining us. Any surprise for you that we have seen this tightening? Initially, Faz had quite a bid in the early, when just maybe about a quarter of the vote in, now about half, and he's still leading by about 20,000 votes.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a slow counting, as maybe the surprise so far. I had hoped, I think part of it is because there's such huge voter turnout today. So we're going to probably have 1.5 million votes, and we've got something over 500,000 plus counted. My impression of that, Linsey, is that, the election day vote, I think Rick said this earlier, the election day vote will benefit Abdul, and a lot of that election day vote has yet to be counted and is the slowest to come. So I'm still feeling very optimistic and feel like this race will separate further as we go into the night.
How do you respond to Stephen's argument that she will be more electable in the general election?
Well, that's historically been the knock and the view of many establishment Democrats. They like people who, in their minds, are cozy with corporate interests, are the ones who are getting $50 million of ad spending and are not wanting to take on AI data centers. But the people are getting pretty frustrated with the sense that our corporate-backed politics has invaded too much of the Republican Party. And certainly people feeling angry at an oligarchy that rules over Trump and that Trump allows to rule over him. And they're also angry at a Democratic Party that doesn't want to stand up to that corporate power. So I tend to think and believe that, Abdul El-Sayed's slogan of this campaign, at times what he would say is the many over the money. And I think that'll bear itself out here in this election contest.
Faz Shakur, thank you so much for joining us once again tonight. I want to bring back an ABC political contributor and former advisor to President Trump, Danielle Alvarez. Danielle, any of the results that you've seen tonight surprised you?
No, haven't seen results that have surprised me. Again, really looking at that Michigan race, it's going to be very critical. El Said winning, I think, again, really signifies the civil war and the fracture that is currently happening between the establishment and progressive socialist wing of the Democrat Party. I don't think that that plays well as we head towards the general election. Again, you look at the way the electorate changes from primary to general. You've got to appeal to moderate voters, to independent voters. I think that that becomes much more difficult when a candidate like the Michigan Mamdani wins the Democrat primary. Of course, Rogers coming in very strong for Republicans, a great candidate in the words of President Trump, an Army veteran, having served in Congress, having voted for the president's working families tax cuts. You know, if that becomes the result of the Democrat primary, I think it becomes a more favorable pickup opportunity for Republicans. It becomes a tougher hold for Democrats who, of course, need to have this Senate seat in order to fight for the majority in the Senate.
And what's your biggest takeaway tonight as we move toward the general election?
I think that the biggest takeaway, of course, as you head toward the general election, and I think one of the misconceptions that a lot of individuals may have is just how narrow the path to a majority in the House is, and certainly a path in the Senate is. You know, the days of having red waves and blue waves are over. The way that redistricting has happened, you can look at the Cook political scoring and you will see that there is a dozen to 24 House seats that are truly up for play these midterm elections. And so what does that mean? It means that operatives are going to be hyper-focused on those seats. It means that I'm looking at the way money is being raised by both parties. Of course, the Democrats are really struggling on that front. They traditionally have outside money that comes in, but for the first time in a very long time, and thanks to President Trump, we have a lot of money on our side. We have heard him brag about having $1 billion war chest. We know that the Republican National Committee has nearly $130 million cash on hand, and that is growing. Of course, the Democrats laughably are, the Democrat National Committee laughably is in debt to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. And so all of this will, of course, matter. Then I'm looking at the polling, of course, headed into the midterms and what the conclusion of the Iran conflict is.
All right, Danielle, thank you so much for your insight and analysis all night long. Coming up, voters headed to the polls in 5 states today. Our politics team will keep following these primary results as they come in. Welcome back, everyone. We'll have more on the latest primary results as the votes continue to come in. One of the big issues during these midterm primaries has been the war in Iran, its impact on the economy and the state of global politics, but it's also had a dramatic effect on the most vulnerable. Tonight, our chief foreign correspondent Ian Pannell takes a close look at how children particularly are faring in Iran, Lebanon, and Israel at a time when peace seems so precarious.
اسمتو بگو.
بنا.
چند سالته؟
5 سال.
5 ساله.
Five months after the start of the Iran war and fragile on-again, off-again ceasefires between Israel, the US and Iran, and another between Iran's proxy Hezbollah in Lebanon and Israel hang by a thread, with no end in sight.
چه چیزایی باعث میشه احساس کنی که همه چی خوبه، امنه، مشکلی نیست؟
بوم نزنه، هیچکی نمیه.
Do you ever get used to the sirens and the explosions? Does it ever become normal?
אף פעם אי אפשר להתרגל לזה, זה תמיד מפחיד, זה תמיד מקפיץ את הלב. אנחנו לא מתרגלים לזה אף פעם, אבל לאט לאט אנחנו יכולים לתת לזה לקרוא לזה שגרה.
The youngest and the weakest are always doomed to suffer the most in war. Children too young to understand why their world is being turned upside down. but old enough to bear the mental and physical scars of the conflicts that are thrust upon them. The Fern Shabak Intermediate School is one of hundreds across Lebanon turned into shelters for displaced families. These children sit in classrooms where the only subject taught today is a real-life lesson, war and survival. But as is often the case, they still try to make the best of this new world. Here, these games are not only a way to escape from the violence around them, but a form of therapy. Social workers come in to help these children cope with the horrors of war.
أحياناً بسبب التغيرات سلوكيات الأولاد بتتغير، فممكن يكون في بعض السلوكيات العدوانية.
The pressure on parents is enormous. Zainab arrived with her 6-year-old son Jawad in March, when Israel first began attacking Hezbollah strongholds in southern Lebanon.
إنه يعني كتير متغير من وقت ما جينا، صار كتير عدواني، بكسر صاير، بيخرب، بيصرخ، ما عادش يتقبل حدا.
And millions have had their childhoods cut short. The UN children's charity UNICEF says more than 4,000 children have been reportedly injured, including nearly 600 who've been killed in the violence across Iran, Lebanon and Israel. The Iran war spread as Israel and Hezbollah, the Iranian-backed militant group in Lebanon, exchanged fire. Israel launching a massive bombing campaign and invading the south. According to the International Rescue Committee, more than 1 million people, including over 300,000 children, have been forced from their homes.
في كتير تحديات عم نواجهها، منها الأوضاع، نحن ما بنعرف شو ممكن يصير بكرة أو ممكن يصير بعده.
UNICEF warns that repeated displacement and exposure to violence can affect children's emotional development, learning, relationships, and sense of safety for years after war's end.
وأنا مش مبسوطة لأنه نحن بعدين عن بيت، ويا ريت نرجع بيتنا. إن شاء الله بنرجع.
For millions of young people living through war and displacement, the end of active violence rarely equals the end of fear, stress, and grief.
سلام دخترهای مینا، من یک دختر ایرانی هستم به اسم سنا.
12-year-old Sana is around the same age as the 120 schoolgirls who were killed in a series of strikes by US missiles at the Shajara Tayyebe Girls Elementary School in the southern Iranian city of Minab at the start of the war.
من از این که شما از این دنیا رفته اید خیلی ناراحت هستم.
The Trump administration has been investigating the strike over the past 5 months.
دخترهای میناب، من خودم را جای شما گذاشتم و شما را درک میکنم. خدا نگهدار شما از طرف سنا.
The memories still stay with Sana, putting her grief to pen and paper in a letter to the Minab girls.
اصلا من هیچ وقت این صحنه‌ها رو یادم نمیره و این که به ما گفتن بریم پناهگاه، چون ما تعدادمون زیاد بود، 200 نفر بودیم، جا نمی‌شدیم بریم اونجا.
For millions of Iranian children, the war didn't just close classrooms, it interrupted an entire generation's education, with schools closed and almost total blackouts of government-approved internet, leaving them with only a few hours of online education. As the conflict continues, rights groups say Iranian children as young as 12 are increasingly being drawn into state propaganda and paramilitary activities. Videos verified by ABC News appear to show children taking part in public military-style trainings, including lessons on how to handle and load weapons. But the memories of airstrikes will be hard to forget. Watch Pana's reaction as a door behind slams shut. Across Iran, a generation of children is tragically united by memories no child should have.
من دوره‌ای که بود احساس زیادی ترس داشتم. دوست داشتم سرمو یه چیزی گرم کنم که مثلا حس نکنم موشک‌ها رو. تفنگ‌ها مثلا موقعی که داشتم مشقامو می‌نوشتم صدا هواپیماها داشتن از بالا سرمون رد می‌شدن. من صدا بم می‌زنه می‌داشتم. دوست داشتم ایسی بمیرم.
Communities in northern Israel have also suffered from the war, and not for the first time. The numbers killed may be far fewer, thanks to an incredible defence system. But for children here, the fear of drones and rockets is all too familiar. Netta, Emma and Jonathan live just 10 miles south of the Lebanese border. Sirens, safe rooms, explosions and geopolitics have come to define their childhood.
זה קצת מפחיד. העובדה שהאנשים שונאים אותנו בעולם, זה קצת קשה לחיות עם זה.
You feel people around the world hate you?
אני אישית לא מרגישה ששונאים אותי, אבל יכול להיות שאנשים בעולם שונאים את המדינה שלנו.
What would you say to those people if you could talk to them? How would you explain?
שכל הזמן שיורים עליכם, זה לא ממש נעים לחיות במקום כזה. לפעמים אתה רוצה לעזוב למדינה אחרת.
Jonathan, just 14, was living abroad. His family moved to Israel from Mexico a few weeks before Hamas attacked Israel on October the 7th, 2023. Israel has been embroiled in near constant conflict since.
Do you get used to it? Does it ever become normal?
No, never. It's very hard, so difficult to live in the north and with the Hezbollah and Iran. We can't live there. We can't live like that.
Do you think there are young men in Lebanon, in Iran, who have similar feelings to you?
Yeah, I'm sure.
You think?
I'm sure.
Yeah. What would you like to see happen now to make life better, not just for you, but for everyone?
We don't need to be friends with Iran and Lebanon, but we can accept that we don't need to fight every day about what we both want. It's not necessary to do this, to kill people, so many people. It's not the right thing to do.
Nearly 7,000 people have died as a result of the Iran war across the region. And tonight, across the Middle East, millions of children are going to sleep carrying questions no child should have to ask. What was that sound? Are we really safe? And when will it stop?
هرچی خواب میبینم خوابای جن که میبینم.
طب شو أكتر شيء بتشتاق له من بيتك؟
أكتر شيء مشتاق له رفقاتي. دوستي. حس بالأمان.
Just simple wishes from kids wanting to be kids. Our thanks to Ian Panel for that. And I want to turn back to ABC Washington Bureau Chief Rick Klein. And Rick, what are we seeing? We do have 50%
Yeah.
but we are inch by inch. We're getting there and still favoring Syed.
Yeah, look, this is about half of the expected vote in the total is in, and we're seeing a lead of about 25,000 votes. I would mention, maybe not coincidentally, Mallory McMorrow, who's another candidate, a more establishment candidate who was in the race up to a couple of weeks ago. She was on the ballot, and she's getting about 26,000 votes herself. So if you were to add those together, it'd be a much closer race. As it is, Al Sayed more than holding his own. He is doing so extraordinarily well in his home county, a very liberal county where you've got the University of Michigan, 20,000 votes he's netting out of there. We've seen out of Oakland County, where Stevens is from, a little bit softer of an edge, but still a pretty solid advantage. It is all coming down to Detroit, Dearborn, that part of the state. Earlier in the night, we saw Stevens with a higher percentage. That was based on the early vote. As more election day vote has come in, that seems to have favored Al Sayed a little bit, and that has cut into that. But we still have just so much vote, 3/4 of the vote in by far the latest county, a county that both of them were counting on in much different ways. So I would say Al Sayed, would you rather be him than Stevens at this hour, but there's still a lot of vote out there and a lot of opportunities for surprises.
And I want to go back because we were just watching that Children of War piece that Ian Panel put together. Give us a sense of how this war in Iran is really casting still a shadow over this primary.
Yeah, this war in Iran and also our relationship with Israel, defining a real issue in this race. The idea of money being sent overseas for conflict and not being spent on constituents in the state of Michigan is something that I heard from a lot of voters, that they want their money spent here closer to home on initiatives, on policies that will help them make ends meet. There's a direct connection between what's happening abroad and some of these domestic issues that are hitting folks at the kitchen table. If we're looking at Michigan as a bellwether, what does it say ultimately about the Democratic Party if Stephen wins tonight? And what does it say if El-Sayed wins? You know, I think whoever wins tonight will inherit a divided party. And I think the work begins tomorrow because whoever wins is going to need the losing candidate's coalition in order to win in November. If Democrats want to take control of the Senate, this is a must-hold seat for the Democratic Party. And so I'm really interested to see what some of these establishment candidates do if El-Sayed wins and what progressive folks do if Haley Stevens wins. Is it more likely that Stevens will jump on board than El-Sayed? Haley Stevens has said that she would support El-Sayed if he were to win. We don't have an indication on El-Sayed's side that he would do the same. And you have to remember, this is the home of the uncommitted movement. I wonder if the fact that Haley Stevens is pro-Israel will be too much for some of the progressive voters on El-Sayed's side. Really good point. Rick, we're going to come to you with a final thought.
Well, look, there were some pre-election polls that had this maybe as a double-digit race. That's not looking like this. It's looking like a lot closer. And that won't matter, of course, to the establishment if they take the L on this. But this is not, we're not a blowout. I think it's fair to say at this hour, this is not going to be a blowout. It's a credible performance by Stevens. She could still win based on the outstanding vote. El-Sayed, I think, has an advantage based on the vote we've seen so far with so much vote outstanding. But these are two very, very strong candidates representing different visions for the party, no doubt. But all of that energy is what the Democrats are going to need. And I think to the point you were just discussing, they'll have to come together in some way, no matter who the nominee is. Michigan's going to be critical for the Democrats to take control of the Senate, and they will have to come together and unite those two parts of the party.
Rick Klein, Avery Harper, so appreciate you hanging out with us at the desk tonight. That is our show for this hour. I'm Linsey Davis. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Have a great night.